Paul McCartney is 82 years old now. After decades of silence, of holding something deep inside his heart, he finally opened up about the moment that changed everything for him. The moment that still brings tears to his eyes. The moment when he heard John Lennon's last words to him. For years, people asked. Fans speculated. Books were written. Documentaries were made. What really happened between Paul and John? Did they ever make peace after the breakup of the Beatles? Did they ever find a way back to each other before it was too late? And now finally Paul McCartney has answered. The story of Paul and John isn't just about music. It's about friendship, fame, jealousy, pride, and something deeper, brotherhood. These two boys from Liverpool became the most famous songwriting duo in the world. But behind the success was a friendship that was often complicated, emotional, and full of unspoken words. Paul and John met when they were just teenagers. John was 16. Paul was 15. They were both growing up in Liverpool, a working-class city that, at the time, offered little hope for young boys with big dreams. But they had something in common, a passion for music. When John invited Paul to join his band, The Quarrymen, something clicked. Paul brought structure and musical skill. John brought attitude and lyrics. Together, they were unstoppable. And soon, the Beatles were born. In just a few short years, the Beatles went from unknown teenagers to the biggest band in the world. The pressure was insane. The fame was overwhelming. And the friendship between Paul and John was tested again and again. They were like brothers, and like all brothers, they fought. As the 1960s came to an end, cracks in the Beatles began to show. Creative differences, money issues, and personal struggles started to build walls between the bandmates. John was becoming more experimental. Paul was focused on keeping the music tight and polished. They were pulling in different directions. And then there was Yoko Ono. Many fans blamed her for the breakup, but the truth is never that simple. Yes, her presence changed things. Yes, John became more distant. But the real problem was deeper. The band had grown too big, and the boys inside it had grown apart. In 1970, the Beatles broke up. It wasn't gentle. There were arguments, lawsuits, and a lot of pain. For years, Paul and John didn't speak much. When they did, it wasn't always kind. In interviews, they sometimes threw little jabs at each other. Pride got in the way. So did fear. But despite all of that, something never changed. The bond, the history, the love. In the mid-1970s, that old connection slowly started to return. John had moved to New York, living a quieter life with Yoko and their son Sean. Paul would visit sometimes. They'd talk on the phone, and just for a little while, they became friends again. Paul remembers one night in particular. He was visiting John in his New York apartment. They sat around, played music, laughed about old times, and talked about their families. There were no cameras, no managers, no fans, just two men reconnecting. Those moments were rare, but they meant everything to Paul. Then came the night of December 8, 1980. John Lennon was shot outside his apartment building by a man who had asked for an autograph earlier that day. The news spread around the world like wildfire. A legend was gone, and for Paul, the loss was unbearable. In the days that followed, Paul kept quiet. Some people thought he didn't show enough emotion. But grief doesn't look the same for everyone. Paul was in shock. He had lost more than a former bandmate. He had lost a part of himself. And yet, for over 40 years, he kept one thing hidden, John's final words to him. It wasn't until recently, in an interview where he reflected on his life, that Paul decided to share them. And what he said left fans emotional and stunned. According to Paul, one of the last things John ever said to him during one of their final phone conversations was this: "Think of me now and then, old friend." Those were the words. Gentle, uncomplicated, heartbreaking. There was no anger, no regrets, just a soft, quiet request to be remembered. Paul said he's never forgotten those words. They've stayed with him for over 4 decades. He thinks of John often, not just when he's playing Beatles songs, but in quiet moments. When he's walking, when he's alone, when he hears a melody that sounds like something they might have written together. He said it's like John is still there, in the music, in the memories, in his heart. After the breakup of the Beatles, both Paul and John had to find new paths. Paul started Wings and went on to have a huge solo career. John stepped away from music for a while to focus on his family. But no matter where life took them, they were always connected. Paul said one of his biggest regrets is not having more time with John. More chances to talk, to laugh, to write songs again. But he's grateful for the moments they did share in those final years. For the small talks, the healing, the quiet peace that came before the end. He wrote the song Here Today as a tribute to John. In it, he imagined what he would say if he could talk to him again. It's full of emotion, sadness, love, and a longing for more time. In that song, he sings, "And if I said I really knew you well, what would your answer be? Well, knowing you, you'd probably laugh and say that we were worlds apart." It's raw and honest. A man speaking to a friend he'll never see again. And now hearing John's last words, "Think of me now and then," adds even more weight to that song. It makes everything more real. Paul said he didn't share those words earlier because they were too personal, too painful. But now, at 82, he feels a responsibility to tell the truth, to let fans know that, yes, they did make peace. Yes, they still loved each other. And yes, those final words were full of friendship and forgiveness. It's a reminder to all of us to say what matters while we still can, to forgive, to reach out, to not let pride or fear get in the way of love. John and Paul had one of the most legendary partnerships in music history. But beyond the fame and hits, they were just two boys who dreamed big, two friends who grew up together. And in the end, that's what remained. Paul said he still writes songs that he feels John would have liked. He still hears John's voice in his head when he's working on a new melody. Sometimes he asks himself, would John have liked this? That voice hasn't left him. It's a beautiful thing that even though John is gone, his presence is still felt. Now fans everywhere are feeling that emotion too. After all these years, they finally know what John said. Not just to Paul, but in a way, to all of us. Think of me now and then. It's simple, but it says everything. And Paul has honored that request. Every time he plays Hey Jude, every time he performs Let It Be, every time he steps onto a stage and sees thousands of fans singing along, John is there. Not just in memory, but in spirit, in the music, in the legacy they built together. At 82, Paul McCartney is still performing, still writing, still carrying the weight of the past, but doing it with grace. And now, by finally sharing John's last words, he's given the world one of the most touching gifts a fan could ever ask for. Because in the end, music is about connection, about stories, about love that lasts long after we're gone. And the story of Paul McCartney and John Lennon, two boys from Liverpool who changed the world, will never be forgotten.